Can you imagine if Dan Schneider did his own ukulele?
I mean,
Kind of could, right?
Kind of could,
I can kind of see
he
it.
Probably should. He probably
should. I mean, Colleen Ballinger also worked on a Dan Schneider show.
Welcome back to the Just Trish podcast. Today we just have a lot to cover. It's very, very popular, very polarizing, but just a sweetheart overall so far. I mean, we just met, but today we have on Alexa Nikolas. Mm-hmm. Hello.
You said it right.
I know.
Some people say Nichols, and I'm like,
wait, I've been saying Nichols too.
It's
Why
Nicholas.
Is that?
I don't know. I think because of the K throws people off, because usually Nicholas is CH.
Okay. That's why I double checked. I was like, I always been calling you Alexa Nikolas.
No, it's okay.
Nikolas.
Don't worry.
Okay.
Everyone's been calling me that lately. It's totally okay.
Yeah, there's a lot happening.
For like 20 years.
This is crazy. I didn't even know how to do the introduction. I'm like, do we say former child star? Do we say Zoey 101? Do we say activist?
You can say all of it. I guess I'm all of it. At this point, I feel like I'm all of it. I've really had quite the journey. I feel like there's been different now phases of my life, which I'm growing to like that more and more, but it's been a lot of jumps through time.
Okay, yeah, we need to go through all those jumps.
Yeah.
I don't know, because there's so much, and
there is.
I've like, for me, this is all new. I like didn't know this was like a thing. Quiet on Set obviously brought all this out for me, but you've been doing this for how many years? You've been talking about it.
Well, I came forward specifically about Dan Schneider and Nickelodeon in 2019, and I was also kind of hinting at it in 2018. And then I did a live on my Instagram, kind of in response to the Zoey 101 reunion, where I wasn't invited, which was, okay, I'm kind of used to that.
Yeah.
But I realized that Dan Schneider was there. And then I was like, oh, I definitely wouldn't have gone anyways because Dan Schneider, like I have not good experiences with Dan Schneider. And so I decided to go live on my Instagram to kind of say a lot of what I experienced on the set. And that was my first, I don't even know what to call it, I guess like not expose, but just kind of telling the truth about what happened to me as a child star. And then with Eat Predators, though, that happened, in 2022, so many years later.
Oh, wow. So that's actually somewhat recent, though. 2019 is like pretty recent.
It is.
Was the reunion, it wasn't like the reboot. It was just like the cast coming together to talk about it?
I see it as like Dan Schneider trying to be part of a reboot and get his career back after obviously Nickelodeon booting him in, what was it, 2017?
Yeah. So
yeah.
After that happened, so you weren't invited back, but you weren't vocal about it at the time. So why don't you think you were invited back?
I left the show because of the toxic work environment. Okay. And so I was bullied for the entire, every season of Zoey 101. I was severely bullied. And Dan Schneider was also one of my bullies. I go into, I mean, we can start at many different, there's so much to cover when it comes to Dan Schneider.
I know, it's so much.
There's so much, but he ended up, making me cry, in a room with all of these Nickelodeon executives at Nick on Sunset. And after that, I was like, I don't want to ever go back there. And so we called Nickelodeon, and my mom basically advocated for me saying, after everything that's happened, if you don't let my daughter go, like, we're going to sue you, basically.
So they knew it ended poorly.
It ended poorly, and I'll never forget, they called, my agents called my mom, and we were eating pizza, and she got off the phone, and she turned to me and said, they released you. And it was such a sad moment for me, because I did want to be on the show, minus the toxic work environment. Yeah. And so it was sad and also kind of a relief at the same time. And then she said, they also said that you were banned from the Kids' Choice Awards.
That is wild. Why is that? Because
they punished me. I think it was like punishment for advocating for myself and wanting to leave the network. And I also think when it comes to these institutions like Nickelodeon, they don't want you to end up mingling with people that are still within the company because they don't want anyone to find out what actually happened. So most of the time when it comes to survivors of anything, they want to isolate them away from people that are so close to the predatory behavior so that people don't know what's actually happening. And so I heard that they told people that I was fired. Most people thought I was fired from Zoey 101.
Where did you hear that from?
other Nickelodeon stars. So I would go to parties when I was a teenager and people would be like, oh, wow, so you got fired from, Nickelodeon. I'd be like, I didn't get fired from Nickelodeon. Like I left Nickelodeon because of, And they were telling different shows that weren't Dan Schneider shows. Nickelodeon was saying that I got fired.
That is so wild. What a weird cover up. That's crazy. And at the time, none of this was out about Dan Schneider, right? So did you think you were like the only person that was dealing with this?
I definitely thought I was the only person. Wow. Like I really thought I was the only person because no one else stood up for me during that time. No one honestly said anything. No one even said they had their own personal experiences with him.
Right.
So I thought, oh, wow, like this is what happened just to me.
Okay, so let's go back. Yeah. So what age do you start acting? I know, little disco ball. You actually be blending with the set nice. No, you're actually, the way you like talk about this is actually amazing how like strong you are talking about it because it's a lot. Like that's a lot. And for being so young. So you start Zoey 101 at what age?
I started Zoey 101 at 12 years old.
Okay, and you're already acting? You're already like...
I was already acting. I started acting when I was 3. Mm-hmm. And I was in Chicago, Illinois. And then I moved out to Los Angeles when I was 6 years old for pilot season. It used to be called pilot season, which was like all the shows that are just starting to come out. And so I moved out to Los Angeles and then I worked like consistently. I did 75 commercials by the time I was 12. And I was on a bunch of different TV shows. And then Nickelodeon at that time was like the peak of a child's career.
Yeah.
Because usually the auditions you're going out for as a child is like someone's kid or it's a little mini guest star. You're not getting that much screen time. Mm-hmm. And for someone who really likes acting, for example, you want as many lines as possible, So Nickelodeon and Disney was the place for kid stars because they gave them the biggest platform to have fun, honestly. And so when I auditioned for Zoey 101, I was like, I was Christian at the time. I was like, I was raised super religious kind of. And I was literally on my knees like, God, please, like, this is a dream. Like, I loved Britney Spears also. And so I was like, this is Jamie Lynn Spears' show.
You knew her.
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't know Jamie, but I knew Britney.
Right.
And my mom was like, this is Britney Spears' little sister. And
yeah,
I was
that's
like,
huge.
Oh my God. I was like, this would be such a dream come true.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were like so excited about it.
I was really excited about it.
Okay. So you like, how fast does it turn? You're on the first episode. Like you're in the first 2 seasons, were you?
2 seasons, yeah.
So how quickly does it turn? Like right away? She's just like, I don't like you, or how does this
Literally
happen?
the first day.
Wait, what?
I'm not kidding. So when I was younger, I was kind of very much like the character Nicole.
Yeah.
I was very bubbly. And all I wanted was like friends. Mm-hmm. And so when I met Jamie at Nick on Sunset, funny enough, this is like a strange note. Like I literally just started like my menstrual cycle and I was like in the most like, I don't know, like I was just feeling like, oh, this is going to be the beginning of my teen years. And this is so exciting. I get to meet like a fellow teenagers because I was homeschooled.
Oh.
And so I was like, this is going to be so exciting. Like this is going to be like high school, but I guess a set version of that.
Like funner, just happier.
And I was just like genuinely excited. And I just remember like, going up to her and just being like, I'm so excited to be a part of this. And she just did not want anything to honestly do with me. It was just like a cold, stone face response.
Right.
And I went, oh, and when you're a kid also, you always think it's you.
Yeah.
So you're not thinking like, oh, this person's mean. You're just thinking, oh, maybe I said too much or like maybe I was too, like you're trying to figure out what you did wrong.
Yeah, why they don't like you.
Yes. And so I just remember going, oh, maybe it's because she's Britney Spears' sister. And I'm sure so many people, want to be around her for that specific reason. And I don't want her to think that. Like I'm actually just genuinely excited to just be a part of this.
Yeah, and you're a coworker.
Yes.
You're not even like a fan or anything.
Yes.
You're like, I'm just here.
And we're going to be best friends in the show. Like you want to be friends also, off screen. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't really understand it. I thought maybe it was a mixture of her being a sister of Britney and then also, her maybe being shy.
Right.
And so I tried to like dial it back kind of. Mm-hmm. It was more just me trying to figure out what she wanted from me. And that was kind of the beginning, and also just kind of the trajectory of my engagement with her was just constantly walking on eggshells, basically, essentially.
There was never like a time where it was kind of okay. It was just constantly like she's just ignoring you, or what is it?
And then she would ignore me, and then it started to escalate into full-on bullying, where there was a girl who was actually a character that did not like Nicole. And her name was Dana. Mm-hmm. And she was Zoey's, we were all roommates together. And she was a lot older than us. I think she was like 3 to 4 years older than me. And she didn't necessarily like, I guess, my energy either. They were like just like very cool, and I maybe wasn't like that. I was just like, I want to be friends and I want to have sleepovers. And that was not them. And so then that's when they started getting very cliquey.
Yeah.
Where it was them having sleepovers and not inviting me. And then they would talk about the sleepovers,
Oh my God, that's so weird.
It was very strange.
It's so odd, especially on a show. I mean, obviously I've never been on one, but
yeah.
It seems like all the other cast had like bonded at some point, when you hear about it. So it's kind of odd, especially because you were one of like the cool girls on the show. You were like their roommate, their friend.
Yes. And I didn't feel like it.
Wow.
It was like the complete opposite, behind the scenes. And it started with just not inviting me.
Yeah.
And then kind of showing that off that they weren't inviting me. And then it would be them like having lunch together in the trailer and not including me. And so then I would be like, with the rest of the cast, which was fine. But it was just so obvious that I was not welcomed or liked. And then it got into like Jamie literally asked me why I smile all the time and asking me if I'm an alien.
What?
Yeah.
Where does that come? Just like meanly just being like, why are you smiling?
Yes. Yeah. Why do you smile all the time? Like, are you an alien?
And are you just like apologetic? Or are you just like, I'm so sorry?
Uh-huh. Just like not, and I'm like, maybe I smile too much.
Oh my God.
Constantly crying. Like I would go to my mom in the trailer and just be like so upset. Like, why do I smile so much? And it was also in plain sight, like around all of the cast members. And then, fast forward, that was kind of, it was getting, worse and worse. And then there was one point where we had an episode where we were at the beach and there was like this huge boulder in Malibu, and me and the Dana character had to be like behind the rock and run out. And I'll never forget it. I like went to go in front of her to like go run, and she pushed me into the rock. And I was just like crying. And then I ran to my mom, and because at that point it got physical.
Yeah.
And I was scared.
And
I didn't want to be alone.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to be alone with this person.
Oh my gosh.
And so, long story short, they end up letting her go. They end up removing her from the show.
So they saw it. They noticed it.
Oh, yes. It was every day. Like,
wow.
It was, and they can't obviously remove Jamie.
Right.
So they thought, okay, we can remove this person, and maybe hopefully that gets Jamie to stop behaving like this.
Yeah.
And I think they were also hoping that it was maybe her instigating it. You know what I mean?
Sure. And she's older. And,
correct.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case. So then they had to get a new roommate for the show. And I'll never forget this. They were testing all these girls to play the role of Lola on Zoey 101. And there was a network, like basically you do testing right before you get the role. And it's basically you going in front of all of like the main execs at the network, and they make the final decision. And you've already done your contract at that point. You have lawyers involved, and it's just like the final decision. And I got a call from Nickelodeon saying, we would like to have Alexa come and read the lines with these actresses because of my experience. We want Alexa's input, who she feels the most comfortable with. So I'm like, oh, wow, this is really nice of them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, I'll go. And the day of, my mom gets a phone call from my uncle Michael, and he calls her and goes, there's a girl who is going to be testing, and I dated her mom when I was in college, and she just called me and let me know that she's going to be there. And now when I look back and I'm like, okay, wait a minute.
It's like nepotism.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's like, wait, what's going on here? I'm like, how often do you even talk to her? I don't
that's weird.
Really weird. Like, she literally called him to let him know, to let me know. So before showing up there, I'm thinking, oh, one of these girls, like, mom dated my uncle,
So long ago.
So long ago. And I'm like, as a kid, you don't even know what that means, really. You're like, okay, I'm going to, like, at least pay attention to this person. It's like a family friend,
Right.
weird, strange family
far
friend.
removed, yeah.
So far removed, college. And so I remember going to Nick on Sunset, and there was all these different girls, and I went to the executive room, and I started reading, the lines with each person who was auditioning for Lola. And then Victoria Justice comes in, and she was just so nice to me. Out of all the girls that came in, she really took time to go your uncle and my mom and the whole thing. And I'm like,
her.
oh my God, she's so sweet. And it made me feel so good to have somebody pay attention to me when it came to the show. And so I read the lines with her, and I also thought she was great. Mm-hmm. And when she left the room, she was, I think, the last one. And they all asked me, who did you feel the most comfortable with? And I said, Victoria Justice.
Wow.
And they said, okay. And, the next day I got a call that she was hired.
Wow. That's amazing. So they really valued you as a cast member.
They did.
Wow.
They did. They didn't never do anything about the bullying that happened on set, but at the end, they did let me know, this has gone too far.
And, we want your input.
Correct.
Yeah.
We want you to be a part of this.
That's amazing.
Which then went into season 2, and then me and Victoria Justice were, best friends. We, drove to set together. Her mom would, put on Billy, what's his name? Who has a daughter named Alexa?
Billy Joel.
Right?
Yeah.
Billy Joel.
Yeah.
Billy Joel CDs.
Yeah.
And we'd be in the van and carpooling, and I would go with Victoria, to set, and we were best friends. And it was a dream, actually. The other co-stars were still, Jamie never talked to me.
Okay.
Jamie stayed completely isolated, never spoke to me whatsoever. But now I had this friend. And so it made me feel okay. And I felt like I was actually having fun for the first time.
Yeah.
But then towards the end, just one day, it was right before the cutoff of the second season into the third season, and I walked into the makeup trailer, and Victoria Justice, Jamie was sitting in the makeup chair, and Victoria Justice was leaning over her, and I walked in, and they all turned at me and was laughing.
Did you know what it was about?
Not at all. I actually still have, to this day, I don't know what it was about. And I went, oh my God, that's my best friend. And now, for some reason, her and Jamie are having some type of connection, but it was really out of the blue for the most part. I'm where is this coming from? So I went all the way to the other side of the trailer to get my hair done, and they were just laughing over there together. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, it's happening honestly all over again. I have no idea why. And you're it's so weird.
Yeah.
No
For no
idea.
reason.
No.
You guys are doing good in scenes together. It looks like you're friends.
Correct. And you're like, wow, why can't we also all be friends? That's something I never understood, was even with the girl who played Dana. It's why is this all split into parts? Why can't we all just be friendly to one another? I don't get it.
And your actors act like you like each other.
True that. If you can act on screen,
just be polite.
Just be cordial too.
Yeah.
I didn't get that.
That's weird. That's so odd.
So odd. And so it really started to escalate those last few weeks with them. And then it became the same thing all over again, where they started all having lunch even with Jamie just in the trailer. And then I just had to go sit alone in my trailer.
Yeah, so it's deja
just
vu.
happened. Deja vu.
Wow.
It was pretty heartbreaking because I was like, okay, well, then you start to think really, what's wrong with you?
Of course, yeah.
You're like, this is so bizarre.
Yeah.
That what am I doing that's wrong? Even am I just too nice? Do I not talk to people? So then I tried to silence myself, and it was just a horrible environment. And then, close to the last episode, we were in Malibu, and it was a whole Malibu mansion episode, and we were by the water, and they just started to physically bully me. There was water guns, and they were just spraying me and laughing, and it was all on set. Then there's actually footage of this where Aaron Sanders, who plays Quinn, literally hits me, and they put it in the show. You can see me get hit. What? And you see me react. Oh yeah, it's horrible.
What was the scene? What was even the setup that it would have gotten
Victoria
that far?
Justice and her are supposed to they weren't supposed to, but we're supposed to be celebrating, jumping up and down that we won.
Okay.
And Aaron goes to hug Victoria, and they start jumping up and down. You see Aaron go like that right to me on purpose.
Whoa.
And they put it in the edit. You're like,
that's wild. That's like the craziest thing.
and it actually went viral recently because I never even knew that got put in.
Oh my God.
And I'm watching it and I'm like, there it is. You know, when you're older and you remember like your just bullying experience and then you're seeing it on screen, you're like, that was it.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, wow. And they put it, Nickelodeon. I mean, Nickelodeon's in a lot of mess up. You know, that's the least of them. But, you know, you're like, wow, they put that in, you know? And at least it validated, honestly, a lot of my experience.
For sure.
And it just kind of escalated. And then the last day was really the peak of everything. And it was all over in the sense where I felt so isolated. No one was really talking to me per se. And I was in the trailer a lot of the time. And Ian, who was a talent coordinator, and his job is basically to take you to and from set or take you from the trailer to makeup and makeup back. And he's like the legal guardian during like the time that he's, you know, he has like restrictions. Like he has to tell your parent exactly where he's taking you and then bring you back. And so he would, you know, knock on the door, and he knocked on the door and he said, hey, I'm going to bring Alexa to makeup and hair for touch-ups. Like touch-ups at like 13 years old is hilarious, but he's like touch-ups, you know? And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And I remember I was walking with him, and then at some point, like between all these different trailers, he turns to me and says, Jamie and Brittany want to talk to you in the trailer. I'm going to take you there.
Are you excited or are you nervous? I'd be like, oh my God, Brittany.
Yeah, I would.
She's like an adult and you're excited. You're like, okay.
Yeah, I was like, wait. You know, it was like kind of confusion because I went, oh. I was like, oh, mate. Like half a second thought was like, oh, maybe Brittany's going to like mediate. Like, like
right.
finally step in and be like, you guys should be. Because I thought of Brittany as like, and I met Brittany so many times on set. And I was like, she was always so nice.
Oh, so you knew her. So
I already knew her. She visited she visited often.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, Brittany's gonna like maybe save the day because she's like was like a hero of mine when I was younger.
Yeah.
So I couldn't imagine her doing anything other than that. And so I'm like, oh, Brittany wants to step in. Like finally someone's stepping in too, you know?
For sure.
So I'm like, this is awesome. And so I went, okay. And he brings me to Jamie's trailer and I'll never forget it. He knocked and I opened the door and like the door, you know, like opens this way. And I remember it like, you know, closing it, and I realized that he was no longer there.
He just left you.
He just left me there. And I see Jamie just run to the back of the trailer. And I was like, this is weird.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, oh, maybe she's like embarrassed. Like maybe she doesn't want to have the convo. You know, you're not thinking like this is going to go bad.
The
bad.
confrontation.
Like, right. Like, oh, I'm just scared. We're all young too.
Yeah.
Like 13.
That's what's crazy about this whole thing.
So young.
Yeah.
And so I step in and, you know, the whole thing happens where the door gets locked and Brittany just starts yelling at me. And she was like 9 months pregnant at the time.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember just like stepping backwards and sitting because I couldn't even believe that Britney Spears was like hated me. You know,
what is she saying? What is she just right off the bat?
Like, yeah, like why are you bullying my sister? And I'm going, bullying you. It was the other way around. And I'm like, oh my God. And she's like rubbing her belly and yelling at me. And then she was like, you know, I'm gonna make sure you don't work again. She said.
She said it to you?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she's like, you're not gonna work again. Like you're not gonna treat my sister like this. And I'm going, I've never even heard that before. That was the first time I heard the reversal of the roles, you know?
And what do you do? It's her sister. Like she didn't believe her sister.
Of course. And also it's Britney Spears.
Oh my God.
I am not going to talk back to Britney Spears.
Yeah.
You know? And especially when I was that little, I was just like looking at her and it was the biggest devastation because I already was trying to figure out what it was about myself that these couple people did not like. And then it was Britney Spears.
And at that time, like the epitome of everything entertainment industry. Yeah.
And like literally I stood in line, you know, when I was 6 years old to buy her first album. And, you know, you're just like, wow. And so I remember it was like tunnel vision. I just remember getting up and like trying to find my way to the door. And that's when I realized it was locked, honestly, because it was, the little red thing was locked, and I'm like hitting the thing, and I'm crying, and I like open it, and I just puke, you know.
Oh my
I just
gosh.
puked.
Oh my gosh.
I was that freaked out.
No one's around. The town coordinator's not around.
No one's there for me. And I'm like running through all of the trailers to get to my mom.
Oh.
And I open the door and I go right to the bathroom, and I'm literally like holding the toilet, like, you know, throwing up.
Yeah.
And my mom's, now you have to know from a mom's perspective, and you're a mom, like your kid comes running in like that. You don't know what happened.
Yeah.
You just got told they went to makeup and hair.
Yeah.
What happened?
In between that time. Yeah.
What happened? And so I just remember, you know, crying, my mom screaming, you know, just going, tell me what's wrong. Because she's probably thinking the worst things. And
yeah, because she's aware of your bullying and stuff at this point. So
she doesn't know what happened.
Yeah.
And her mind's going in a whole bunch of, and I couldn't speak.
Nothing
couldn't tell her. I remember trying, and I couldn't say anything.
Oh my gosh.
And then my mom like opens the trailer. I just remember, and she's like screaming, like, come in, you know, my daughter, and the set teacher's nowhere to be found. And, you know, and so eventually, of course, Dan Schneider shows up.
Okay, so he hears your mom screaming. He's the first to come?
He's like, no, these two executives are the first to come from Nickelodeon that were in town from New York. Oof. And then Dan Schneider comes.
What's he say?
Oh my God. He literally walks in, and I'll never forget this. I've said this a million times, but he walks in, I'm on the floor in the bathroom, and he just looks at me. He has his glasses. He puts them down at me, and he goes, "What now?" To me.
God. Oh my God.
So then I'm like,
jeez.
I mean, as a kid, you're just processing. You're like, well, I'm the worst. Everyone is annoyed by me.
Yeah.
And
oh God,
no one's advocating for me, really. And so I just remember finally telling them, you know, like Britney Spears, like Ian brought me into the trailer and Britney yelled at me. That's all I can kind of like remember mustering up, basically. And he just looked at me and went, and he stepped out, and there was like, we were all just like there going, where is he going? He comes back with a box that, do you remember those like portable DVD players?
Yes.
With the screen?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Okay. He literally comes back and he goes, here, like, you feel better?
Oh, like a gift? He's trying to like, okay.
And I'm like looking at this DVD player like.
Wait, what? Has he ever done that before? Try to like bribe you to get, that's so odd.
No, it was just like, and it was the wrap gift. So everyone was already getting that, I guess, at the end of the day.
Okay.
But he gave it to me early because I was so upset.
He just thought that's how. Does he have children?
No.
Okay, so I was like, I just think that's how you calm someone down. He's like, here's a DVD.
Right.
player.
He has, but maybe that, and also why he doesn't. Like,
yeah.
You're
okay.
like,
it's probably good he doesn't. Yeah,
yes.
That's wild.
It was really weird.
My gosh.
And I just remember going, thank you. And he goes, you have to go back on set. Like, I know what's like, if this thing's happening, but you have to go on set. This is the last scene of the day. And my mom went, no, she's not. And then I stood up and I was like, oh, no, it's okay. Like, because I was so worried being the problem.
Yeah.
That I was like, it's okay. Okay, I can go. And they were like, well, you have to go. They reminded me, like, you have to go.
Wow.
So they touched me up for another 20 minutes because I was so, you know, crying for so long and throwing up. And then I went on set to film the last scene, which was the last scene I ever filmed on Zoey 101. And afterwards they said, we'll meet with you at Nick on Sunset in a few days and we'll have like a conversation about everything that happened. And you're like, okay.
Yeah. At least that, yeah, I guess it's good. It was like a final scene. It's not like you had to do the rest of the season or something.
God.
Yeah.
It all happened so weird.
Yeah, the timing.
The timing of it.
Yeah.
It just happened to be the last day of the second season.
So then maybe they're trying to push you out, you think? Maybe that was like her trying to intimidate you? Like,
yes, a little bit. That's as I like think about it more and more as I'm getting older, specifically the Victoria like vibe, when I look back at it, was very much pushing me out of there. Because I do think that sadly, especially in the industry, everyone's taught to compete with one another, like everyone's competition, instead of thinking about how there's enough space for everyone to do something.
right.
I did feel that a little bit towards the end. And now looking back at it, it was like, wow, it was very convenient that the last week of the second season, you just turn on me.
Yeah, you get yelled at by Britney Spears. Victoria Justice turns on you. Like, that's odd.
And your mom dated my uncle. Like, how could you do this to me?
Like, call your mom.
Right, call your
uncle.
mom.
Yeah.
Call your like that was so weird that you told me that before, and then at the end, this happened. You know, it's very peculiar looking back at it. You're like, how much of that was kind of intentional? And how much was it maybe just not? Like, I have no idea, but it is weird timing.
Wow. So, okay. And then you talk about Dan Schneider also abusing you on set. Is this like verbally or physically? Okay. Never like pushing or anything.
No, he never pushed me. He was just I never knew what version of Dan Schneider I was going to get on set. And sometimes he was nice. And then sometimes he was just mean. Like, you know, very snappy, very like, not impressed by you, like walk past you, not say hello to you, just not a nice person. So you just always felt a little bit, I did at least, I always felt a little bit uncomfortable showing up on set whenever he came on set, because he would always be like, most of the time I noticed him not in a good mood. And I noticed him, I mean, you know, there's a few things that were very uncomfortable was I saw him do very inappropriate behavior on set. I saw him, you know, going around and trying to take photos of kids' feet.
And as a child, you were like, this is weird? Or
I
looking
didn't think
back?
it was, well, he was walking around with dollar bills. That's what I remember. And he was telling the kids, you know, come, I'll take photos of your feet and give you $1. Like, it was like some funny, like, hoax, like, thing. And I remember my mom going, no.
She didn't tell why. She's just like, no.
She goes, no.
Yeah.
I don't take the dumb. And I think she was also more concerned, like, don't take money from him. Like, she thought it was weird. Like, don't take $1 bill from him.
But he tried.
Oh, yeah.
With you.
Oh, he tried with all of them. All of us.
And when he's coming up, he's like, let me take a picture of your feet. I'll give you $1.
With his little digital camera. And some of them did.
Yeah. I guess as a child, you don't think anything of it.
Don't. You're like, feet, like, funny, like.
Right.
Not, like, funny, but you're like, I think that's what's scary about the feet thing is when you're a child, you're taught what is private. And it's usually things that you have to put clothes on all the time.
Right.
You're not taught that something that is exposed can be seen to someone. Like a fetish thing is not, you don't process that as a kid. No one teaches you what that is.
Yeah, no.
It's just the basics.
Yeah.
Like, don't let anyone do X, Y, and Z, basically.
Right.
And so what's dangerous about him is that it was something that a child wouldn't necessarily pick up on. You would have to be an adult to understand that.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, feet. You know, if he was going around asking for something else, we'd all go, whoa.
Yeah.
And you're fired, you know, but that like makes it complicated. Yeah. And so I just remember my mom not letting me. And then, you know, I just remember him being in trailers for my wardrobe fittings and watching me spin around in short skirts and him saying what skirts I was going to wear that episode and having to wear biker shorts underneath them because in case my butt shows.
He said that.
Yeah, the wardrobe, like he would pick the skirts. They would go shopping because that's what wardrobe like does. They go shopping and he would probably tell them like usually like, oh, this is the kind of vibe of the character. She would go shopping and it'd be all different kinds of things, pants, dresses, not all skirts, but he would regularly pick the skirts and they were so short that I was required to wear biker shorts
just
underneath.
In case.
But the biker shorts were too long, so they had to cut them.
Oh my gosh. Were you like, did you do the fingertip rule where it was like.
That's exactly, that's
like,
literally
is it touching?
It was like that. And it was like, oh, there's this much that they would cut them, but then they wouldn't seam them. So they would just roll
Oh my
all
gosh.
day. So I was always, like, all I remember on set a lot of the time was going like this to pull down these biker shorts. Now you look back and you're like, that is inappropriate. Why am I having to wear what? And also at least seam these things.
Yeah, right. So it stays down.
Yeah, so I'm not having to sit there uncomfortably. Like it's humiliating almost. As a kid, you're just
uncomfortable and just like how are you acting on top of that? Are you the one wearing because your character was somewhat like you said it was like for the guys, the male gaze. So are you the one wearing the shortest skirts and the tightest shirts?
Definitely.
And like the lines, like the chesty one that was in the Quiet on Set, like did you know at the time or did your mom, or you're like, this is kind of weird or I'm uncomfortable, or you just don't think about it because you're acting?
Didn't even think about it because I also think that's what's really dangerous about being a child star is that you're taught that there is a big difference between pretend and reality. And when you're on set, this is pretend. And then when it says cut, it's reality. And so no matter what you're doing in the pretend land, doesn't really feel alarming, because let's be honest, like during that time of being on Zoey 101, I was also auditioning for girls that were survivors. Like I was auditioning, To Catch a Predator and CSI Miami. These roles. Sadly, the industry, especially those like CSI, all of those CSI shows, a lot of those roles were pretty intense situations they would put the kids in. Like the mom's either, an addict, or and so you're in already this pretend world that's wild.
That's dark.
Yeah. Like I even remember when I was 14, I was going out for, like sex workers, like in movies.
I felt like that wasn't allowed. Remember after Jodie Foster did Taxi Driver, I thought you had to be like 18 to zip up pants and stuff like that. Or it's just...
No, maybe to zip up the pants, but you can still play...
like a hooker or something. And you were auditioning for those roles.
Yes. And so I had to dress like that. Like it would have to be like, it would tell me like what she looked like, and you would dress like that for the audition. So I have photos of me still to stay like... with my belly button showing and like a short skirt and a belt and going for a sex worker role.
I mean, they have...
At 14.
That's wild, because they have people who are 18 to look younger, right?
Yep.
Like it's like Winona Ryder was 18 when she did the sex scenes with Dennis Quaid for Jerry Lee Lewis. It's like she played a 13-year-old, but she was 18. Like it's weird they don't have that law. Like how can you play a sex worker at 14?
As long as you're not doing a sex scene. So if you're just playing her and she's like, let's say the detective comes, in the scene, like, he shows up and he's like interrogating you.
But you're in sexual situations. Are you saying sexual lines?
Yeah, they'll probably like reference it, and then you're talking about someone who stole your money or something. Like it really depends but it's still on it's so extreme regardless that, you're so taught that there's this pretend land that's set life. And when they say action, you're there. And then when they say cut, you're out of there. And so for me, when I look back at the Chesty line, I didn't even process any of it because it was pretend land. And you just don't even think anything is weird in pretend land almost. It's so hard to describe, which is why it's dangerous.
Right. And you're going through puberty. So are you just like totally comfortable with wearing tight shirts at 13?
I wasn't. So I was like, when I look back at that whole time, I'm like, I wasn't like that until right at the end of season 2. Because now I think, like, how much did Nicole influence me?
Right. You're like, oh, I'm fine now wearing this and flirting with the guys.
Totally. And I was always put in flirting with the guys. And then the guys were always, flirting with me. And so I really grew up into like teenage years through Nicole, honestly.
Yeah.
And so there was kind of like a blurred line there of like who was Nicole sometimes and who was me.
Yeah.
So when I look back at that, I didn't really notice it. And you think, oh, comedy. And no one was thinking about predatory behavior on sets yet. It was Stranger Danger era. It was always some random person you don't know. And no one was teaching anyone on set, which is why it pisses me off that they all knew about Brian Peck. And no one was coaching anyone on set to know, hey, we've already seen this happen here multiple times, by the way.
Right.
Like, let's make sure the kids know who to be wary of, that it could even be an AD, that it could even, they didn't do anything like that.
What year is this? Like season 1, season 2?
2004.
Is this, and then Drake Bell had his lawsuit in what year? Was it after?
It was right around the same year.
Oh, interesting.
I'm trying to think. Like, I think
That's what I was thinking too. Like early 2000s, I'm trying to think if it's like out there now that Nickelodeon's kind of sus.
They knew. It was definitely past the time of him coming forward to the police. That's for sure. Okay. And Jason Handy already happened at that point.
Right. That was, no one talks about him. Like I watched the full thing and I was just like, that's wild. How come no one's talking about him like kissing these girls and stuff like that? It's like so weird.
Jason Handy is just, I mean, he called himself like a straight up, PDF file in his own journal.
Yes.
And you're like, okay. And now he's in prison. He's for till 2040, I think he's in prison.
So he's in prison, but Brian Peck's not for.
Yeah. Well, that's because Brian Peck is well connected.
That to me, when I heard what happened with, I was like, how is he only for 16 months?
Because Jason Handy's not connected and Brian Peck is connected. That's the difference in Hollywood. Like that's the issue is if you're not connected, you're screwed.
Yeah.
You can, but then if you are connected, you have a lot of protection. People will rehire you. Brian Pex was best friends, or probably still is, with Bryan Singer.
Wow. Is he still
We all know
directing?
Brian.
Yeah.
He's done. I don't think he's directing
Okay.
anymore.
I feel like there's certain ones that it's pretty obvious, like that's over.
Yeah, it's like you're not. You're. But when you look at what his connections were, you there was not even one article that was published when he was like arrested.
So scary. That's like terrifying.
Terrifying. You're like huge dialogue coach of Leonardo DiCaprio,
right?
And not one article that he's been arrested, or no even reporting that Nickelodeon has had multiple predators on sets being arrested
until now. Now it's out there,
Thank
which
God.
is wild. Okay, we're going to jump to that, but just to finish off the Zoey 101. So you have
Dan.
the meeting. Dan, the abuse. And then you had the meeting.
Yes.
And is he at the meeting?
He's at the meeting. I remember going there with my agent and my lawyer. We spoke to her on the phone before going, and she's like, I don't need to be there. Like, everything will be fine. My agent did show up, from my knowledge. And it was my mom, my agent, and me all in a room. And it was like 4 different execs and Dan Schneider, and like this huge conference table, and like these black chairs, and and I'm just looking at the adults, and my mom's to the right of me, and then my agent. And they're basically, telling me how lucky I am to be on the show, and that I'm not grateful enough, and that I have to suck it up, and I shouldn't be too sensitive. And I'm like a kid, and so I'm feeling under pressure, and so I'm crying. And just
the fact that you were in the room is like crazy
with all the adults.
Yeah, like it should have, I don't know how that would work, but probably should have been relayed a different way. But yeah,
very different.
It's intimidating.
Super intimidating. And then at one point they basically go, let's talk to Alexa alone.
Oh.
Because I think that this is too overwhelming for her. And let's just have like a one-on-one like conversation with her where she doesn't feel overwhelmed by a bunch of adults in the room. And we can just tell her like what happened, and we can ask her questions basically. And so, I remember my mom and I stepping outside, and I remember us all calling the lawyer, and the lawyer said to us like, what's the big deal? Like, you've let your daughter in auditions 101. Like, she's already been in rooms with them.
No, yeah.
And so the rationale is you're being paranoid to think that it's weird to go into a room. You're like, these are people you've been working with for 2 years. And, this is not the best scenario, but really what could happen, And so I remember my agent going, I'm going to leave. Like, she's totally fine. Just let her tell them what happened, And I just thought, okay. And I've also been in rooms with them. Like, I've been in audition rooms. So you're not thinking what was going to happen. So when I got in, though, I was sitting there across from everyone.
Oh my
and
gosh.
Dan just like lost it.
So wait, it's you by yourself?
Yes.
Your mom did not come in with
right
you?
outside the door.
I mean, even as an adult, you just want someone to validate like what's happening in the room. Okay, so it's you. You're sitting across, and they're like right over here.
And women. Yeah, there was women execs, male exec, and Dan like right in the middle.
How many you think?
5 probably in total.
So 1 child and 5 adults. Oh my God.
And I thought like, they were already saying I should be grateful, but it was very calm-ish in the room. No one was yelling. And then once I was alone, he just like went full and was like, this is not Nicole 101, this is Zoey 101, and like, you're not grateful, and all you do is complain, and like, you're so sensitive. And it was just like,
oh my God.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And to be honest with you, it was about probably only a few minutes that I was able to last in there.
Yeah.
And I just got up.
Oh.
And I ran out the room, and I said, I'm never going back near them ever again. And my mom said, okay. I remember she held me and she went, okay. And we left Nick on Sunset and called my agent, and she said, we're done here.
Wow.
And it was just sad because I did want to do what I was doing. I enjoyed being creative and being an entertainer. I actually did enjoy that. But it was everyone around that made it a toxic work environment.
That's like the dream job. Yeah. You're like a lead on a show in Malibu. And
in Pepperdine University.
Yeah. It was, oh my God. That's devastating.
It was. And then I was banned from the Kids' Choice Awards. And
so they're like, we'll let you go. Did they not want to let you go when you said you were going to quit?
They did not want to let me go.
That's so interesting. Why do you think? They just, I guess.
Well, Nicole was popular.
Yeah.
Also, there was a Nielsen, like not a Nielsen, but they used to do those, what are they called when they put kids in a room and they basically ask them like who's their favorite character and who's their, oh God, I always forget. And they pay you to do it.
Yes.
I'm totally blanking on what it is.
I forgot too,
So you know
but
what I'm talking about?
Oh, totally. So they can kind of get like a read of what works and what doesn't.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the execs coming on set and saying that Nicole surpassed like favorite character.
Wow.
But they said that in front of the kids. So then all the kids heard that I was the favorite character.
Oh,
which
no.
That's why you don't do that.
Yeah.
Because that makes it like, why would you even say, who cares? That's for you guys to figure out and to know like who you're writing in. Like it's none of our business. Like, like that doesn't even matter anyways to us.
Right.
It matters to you. So like, why are you telling the kids that? But I remember that day that he told us that and was talking about like, oh yeah, Nicole's a favorite character in all the testings. And so you're like, oh, okay, well, but that's not a good idea to tell the children that. Maybe tell Dan that, sure, because he knows who he's writing in the most or whatever.
Yeah.
But not for us to know. And so I think that also just kind of made everything even more. That's why kids shouldn't be in these scenarios.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they're too even adults can't handle them.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Already adults hear that stuff and they're hurt.
Yep.
You know, like you're human. So to imagine a kid in that scenario can't process any of that. So yeah. So that was honestly my like exit departure from Zoey 101. And then I was banned. Like I just wasn't even able to go anywhere near anything that was Nickelodeon. So
why did you agree to that? Like, because that's the only way they were gonna let you out? Like, what if you're like, but I'm an actress, I want to go to these things.
They ban you. Like you're not allowed.
What does that mean? Like they
you can't get on the list.
So you're like blacklisted from Nickelodeon.
As a kid?
Oh, no.
Yeah, and they do that to adults. Like I talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
That was my first experience of it though. And that's why people don't want to go up against their boss or these institutions or these networks, for example, is because they punish you when you do. Mm-hmm. They don't just like let you go. They want to make sure that like there's consequences for you doing something like that.
And then do you continue to act
I did.
on other shows and stuff?
I did.
Okay, so it's not like blacklisted from Hollywood, just Nickelodeon.
I was not, but like, yeah, Disney was super stoked to like pull me. This is so wild.
You went to Disney?
I went to Disney, but I would audition for Disney shows and Disney did hire me. And this is wild. So my first Disney role that I got after Nickelodeon was Sweet Life of Zack and Cody.
Oh.
And it was like 2 weeks after I left Zoey 101.
Wow.
So Disney could not wait, like, like I'm gonna pluck your
that's
person.
Kind of everything.
Yeah, you're like, okay, whatever. They're using their fandom or whatever, and plucked me.
Yeah.
I show up on set, and this one was like a live audience, like set vibe, which is very different than Zoey 101. And I'm sitting there, and I see someone like in the back, and I'm like, who the? It was Ian. Ian, the guy who brought me into that trailer, got fired from Zoey 101, and Disney hired him, and just happened to be on the show that I.
That's wild. Did you
think about Brian Peck getting hired in Sweet Life of Zack and
Was
Cody?
he at I wonder. That's what I'm saying. Is it at the same time?
It was around the same time, I'm sure.
Wow. Okay. So did you talk to Ian?
I ran to my mom.
Oh no.
And then she ran to them and said like he cannot be the talent coordinator because he just got let go at Nickelodeon for this. And my daughter was put into a very like horrible situation by this guy. Didn't even tell me. So they wouldn't let him. I don't know if he ever returned after my episode, but he wasn't allowed on set during
well, that's good. One for Disney, I guess.
One for Disney. Yeah, they were like, we're not going to mess with that.
Oh my gosh. So you're just doing a guest episode on Sweet Life?
It was just a guest. Yeah, it was just a guest episode.
So you're working at Disney and movies and...
Yeah, and I did like Walking Dead and Mad Men, and I just I went more into drama after Zoey 101. I was kind of like, I mean, I auditioned for comedy, of course, but I went more in the drama.
Interesting. Okay.
More in the drama direction, I guess.
So you're fine acting. And when's your last acting job you've done since then? Did you retire, quit?
Sadly, I was, well, there's certain things you can say on YouTube, but I was, groomed like when I was 16 years old by a man that was, 17 years older than me from the internet. And it spiraled into him literally grooming me until I was 18 years old and then having me go meet him in person in Berlin, and all under the pretense of it being soulmates. like a typical, I mean, we all heard what Drake was kind of saying about very similar. And I went and met him for the first time in Berlin when I was 18, because when you're 18, you get your trust fund money.
Okay.
And
is this like the Coogan account thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can't touch it until you're 18.
Okay. And you had money in there because I know the Honey Boo Boo, my mom stole the money and
my
stuff.
My mom did not.
Okay,
so
nice.
I didn't have a lot of it, but I had like enough, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm very lucky. So, it was exciting for me because when I was 16, actually, my mom ended up losing the house because when you're not working enough, So I lost my mom in the sense where she had to go to Florida and move in with my grandma, and I stayed behind and to continue acting. And I was just kind of couch surfing, honestly, as like a minor, which, I can't even imagine what that's like. It's a horrible journey.
Yeah.
And so also very vulnerable to people like, Michael Milosh, who was the person who groomed me when I was 16.
Oh my gosh.
And so, anyways, fast forward, I get this money, and you think you're like, what are you going to do with this money you got? And, he was like, come to Berlin. And I was like, okay, I'm already going to go meet my dad for the first time because I never met my dad. My dad left my mom when she was 6 months pregnant.
Oh.
And
wow.
I found him on the internet, and I reached out to him when I was 8. I always said, when I'm 18, I'm going to reach out to my dad.
Wow.
And so I reached out to him, and he was in South Africa. So I was like, okay, wait.
What?
He's a New
What is he
Zealander.
doing down there?
What is he doing? He's a New Zealander. He's actually like born and raised in New Zealand.
Oh.
And so he was in South Africa working.
Okay.
And so he was like, if you basically want to see me, like, thanks, Dad. Like, I had to pay for my own ticket. Yeah.
Yikes.
Oh, yeah, horrible. But, whatever. So he was like, if you want to come visit me, like, this is where I'm at, and I would love to meet you. And I was just so excited to even have finally the chance to go meet him. And so I said, okay, I'll stop in Berlin on my way to meet my dad for the first time. So I meet the person that, like, basically totally ruins my life, like, on the way to meet my dad who, like, abandoned my mom when it's, like, all very strangely interconnected.
Yes.
And so I went to Berlin, and then, that was the first time that it was just a very horrible story. I was like, essayed, like the whole thing, and ended up leaving Berlin, going to meet my dad, and then coming back to Los Angeles. And then he was like, I'm gonna come visit you. Not my dad, but this predator. And he's like, I'm going to come and visit you in Los Angeles, and I'm going to come see you. And, I love you and all this. And I didn't even realize, like, now that he already had, like, all these things set up. So he had, like, studio time set up. He was meeting with all these record labels. Like, he was just using my everything that I had to live rent-free while he was doing this album, to have me drive him to the studio to and from. And he was Canadian, so he didn't have a green card. And so he was like, grooming me the whole time to also give him a green card.
Oh my God.
So, but I didn't know any of that. I'm just thinking, oh, this is like a musician that's...
You're like in love though.
Yeah. I'm
you're
thinking.
18.
And he was grooming me at 16.
Sure. So you're like,
so
this
many
is
years
love.
in.
You don't have a dad, so you're like, okay, this is someone that's like protecting me.
Correct.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, this person really loves me. And also, like, when you're a child star, it's already grooming you into people pleasing and not knowing what your boundaries are and not knowing how to advocate for yourself. And so you're more vulnerable to predatory behavior, which is why I really am against child stars in general, because you're not told how to advocate for yourself. And so when you meet a predator along the way, you're not looking for those same red flags maybe necessarily, because you're thinking, oh, like if someone says they like me, it's my job to be also nice to them back.
Right.
And it's this whole power dynamic thing, and they're an adult, and this the whole thing. And so I really believed that it was real, but it wasn't. And fast forward, he, within like 1 year of him using me to stay at my apartment and drive him to and from, and he was broke. Like, he had nothing wrong with that, but like
They always
wasn't.
are.
Yeah,
The 18-year-old is taking care of the 40-year-old.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, he never even bought like the spinach at Whole Foods, And so I'm like paying for everything, driving him to and from. And fast forward, he just pops the question when I was 19.
Wow.
And he's 17 years older than me.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, this is love, you know? And he's like, we're going to travel the world together and I'm going to take you here and here and we're going to live a beautiful life. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, we're going to get married in 2 weeks. Like, let's just do it now. And I'm like, and I knew it wasn't like I was like, I knew in the sense where I was like, oh, wow, this is fast. And his reasoning for that was that I have to leave every 3 months.
Right.
So if we want to be together, let's just go get married and we can be together. So we did that and he got a green card. And I found out later on that his record label wouldn't sign him if he didn't get a green card and they wouldn't pay for his artist visa. So he just used me for...
Wow. So you guys were married? Were you married a long time to get a green years.
Card? Well, yeah. So he got his visa at least at first.
Okay.
Was able to tour. And then he got his permanent.
6 years.
6 years. Tried to escape multiple times, but...
You did?
But then, so basically what happened was, for your question of when was my last episode, like what last show that I ever worked on was in 2012, which was the year I got married. And so once I got married, he took me away from my career and told me, like, you know, he told me basically I needed to travel the world and that because I was a child star, I never got to see the world. And so I went and traveled the world and ended up like just honestly losing my career while traveling. And he was just using me the whole time.
It's so bizarre he wouldn't want you to continue acting, right? Like, so he could be connected in that world.
He only wanted me to be dependent on him. So,
but he was dependent on you. Was he making money at any point?
He got a $1 million record deal.
Oh.
So he got a $1 million record deal 6 months after I got married to him. So they wouldn't give him the $1 million record deal unless he married me.
Okay. I guess in a weird way, you're kind of like he's supporting you now and you're not supporting him.
Yeah, but it left me desolate. So then what ended up happening at the end is that every time I tried to leave, I didn't have a career now. And so every time I tried to leave, he would email people and say that he was going to put me on the streets and that he wasn't going to give me alimony. Oh. And that he wasn't, so he put me in it was all very premeditated. And also he's like just a predator in the typical sense where it's all about power and control for him. And so now that he was the person in that position.
And your money's gone from.
Gone.
Yeah.
Gone.
Oh gosh.
And so that was like 6 years of just hell. Like it was
abusive,
just, it was really, really bad. Like wrote a whole, and that's how I learned. I mean, that's what ended up leading me to Eat Predators was because I ended up learning how these institutions cover up SA because I went with him to all of the record labels meetings. So he would bring me to Universal and bring me to all these different record labels and tell them about how he met me on MySpace when I was 16. And they would these huge execs, like Tom Wally and all these people, would go, wow, it's so romantic. Like, you guys are such a romantic couple. Like,
oh, my God. Yeah. So twisted. But so in your head, too, I mean, because I was in similar situations when I was like 16, and it's like you think it's so romantic because you think it's like, wow. And then there's this dream you guys got married and he's a rock star. And it's like, yeah. And you think it's like cool. Like movies show that, too. It's like, oh, this is like amazing.
And no one teaches, like, you know, I didn't really know, like, that. I didn't know what a predator honestly really was.
Yeah, of course.
I knew like little bits of it, but he didn't look scary. You know, like it wasn't the same.
He wasn't like creepy old and fat.
No. He's like talented and this and that. And you're just like, I didn't know that was what that could be. And so it really messed up my life, but also it did teach me a lot about from Nickelodeon and then the music industry realm. You know, when I tried to escape him, he wouldn't let me get a lawyer. Was giving me like DEATH like threats, text messages. It was horrible for so many years, and he wouldn't let me get a lawyer. And I thought that was like so weird. So I escaped him in 2016. Didn't end up getting finalized the divorce until 2019 because he wouldn't let me get a lawyer. And that's when his management, Red Light, who's owned by Ticketmaster and Live Nation, came into the picture and all of a sudden was controlling all of the finances and giving me money monthly and telling me, you know, basically telling me like, you need to sign these simple divorce papers. And so they would send me these emails over and over, simple divorce. I was like, I need a lawyer to look over these papers. And he would not let me. He would take money away. Fast forward, I was exhausted by 2019 and I wanted out of here. And so he ended up saying, what about a mediator? And I went, a mediator? Okay. What is a mediator? You know, and I'm like Googling what a mediator is. I'm like, okay, like Legally Blonde style. Like, what is a mediator? And I'm like, oh, it's a non-biased party who's going to like be in there. And okay, this feels a little bit safer than just like signing a contract when red light's coming to my front door.
Yes.
So red light does the introduction though.
Oh.
To the mediator.
Yeah. They have the connection.
They have the connection, but they're the one hiring. I'm not thinking anything of it. They send the introduction. I go and meet up with the mediator. Very simple. You're going to go with your jewelry and car and money, and he's going to go with his. Oh. Just not getting anything. Like, okay, I'm not fighting this also anymore. I'm scared. I don't want to be anywhere near him. I want out, basically. Okay. They give you a little piece of paper, what your agreements are, gets emailed to you. I'm like, okay. 6 months later, I get an email about a stipulated judgment. And I'm like, what the heck is this? So then I email her back and I'm like, what is this? And she goes, oh, you know, the stipulated judgment is just what we all agreed upon, but it's just more like legal language of just like your taxes and this and that. And I'm like, okay, it's like 30 pages. I look at it. I don't see really anything at all. It's all just like here, therefore, like hereafter. I'm like, how would whatever. Right. You know, much. I'm like, what could possibly be in there? And so I'm like, okay. And I sign it. And you see the whole email exchange with me with her. And then I noticed that the stipulated judgment draft, red light, is like accidentally CC'd in there.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
And I don't think anything of it. I'm like, oh, they accidentally, or maybe they just accidentally got her in there. And so I'm going, oh, that's so weird that red light's in there. Fast forward, when I sue him in the future for what he did to me, I get a call from my lawyer in January. And they're like, are you sitting down? Like, you definitely need to sit down. And I'm like, what could possibly have gone wrong? And they go, do you remember a stipulated judgment, like the typical divorce papers you get? And I said, yeah, I remember the divorce papers. And they go, oh, well, in there he had you release your child essay.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Without telling me, without anything. And I was like, how is that even possible to put a crime in a divorce agreement? You know, I couldn't even believe what I was hearing because it was a simple divorce. That's all I kept hearing. It's just a simple divorce. You're like just separating, and they tricked me into
releasing child essay
in a divorce agreement.
And so what does that mean?
He could have hit me every single day for the entire marriage, and he even put battery in there.
Oh my gosh. I mean, how is that like legal?
It's not technically legal.
It's
not technically legal, but it put strain on my lawyers in the sense where they never even have been in that situation before. That was like what really opened my eyes up to record labels and institutions actively covering up, because I saw it with my own eyes.
Yeah.
They were the ones trying to deliver those papers to my door, like weekly, calling them simple divorce papers, because they didn't want me to they wanted those things to be released so they could protect their artist and keep touring him on the backs of me.
Right. Having that even in there just shows guilt, right? Like that just shows a criminal. Yeah.
That's not normal in divorce agreements. And I started calling, after that happened, then I would call all of these people that got divorced, you know? And I'd be like, do you have this in your, and they went, no. And I'm like, I couldn't find one person that had that language.
No.
Yeah. So that was the lowest of lows in all the industries. Like that really, because then you can't even get they were like, you know.
It didn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like, wow, you can't even win. So when I found that out, I just ended up deciding, like, I'm going to go out in the streets and start protesting. I don't even know, like, where that happened. I don't even know how that ended up coming out. But I was like, oh, if I can't get justice, then I'm going to go and go protest for other people.
So Kleenex is there if you need.
Sorry.
No. Take your time.
So that I just did that. I went and protested Diplo's. Diplo because he was actually also best friends with my abuser. And when I saw that Diplo was playing an all ages show in the middle of the street, you're like, oh, this is what the music industry is doing. He has a criminal investigation. And they're just putting him in an all ages show in the middle of Melrose, Los Angeles, in an ice cream truck.
Diplo is in the middle of a criminal investigation. Oh, gosh.
And that's the music industry. They don't care about anyone, you know? And so I was like, okay, I was like, I'm going to go protest. And Diplo was just doing this show, and it was for Eat the Rich. And I was like, I just started texting some of my friends and went, do you want to go protest the show? Because he'll see us, because it was like out literally in the middle of Melrose. And I wanted to go stand up for someone else. So I organized that. It was like only 4 people ended up going. And I was trying to think of my protest sign. And I've never made a protest sign before. And I was like, Eat the Rich. And so I was like, Eat Predators.
Oh, so that's where it started from.
That's where it started from. And
just you out on the street of Melrose by yourself with 3 friends?
With my husband and 2 other people. And
so you had a new guy at this point.
I did. I already had my daughter at this point.
Oh.
I didn't get to sue him until the child essay. So I was past the statute, and then in 2018, the statute opened up for a very short window, and I was able to sue him. But then I wasn't able to because they blocked it. Because when you're in the plaintiff, when you're doing like pro bono, lawyers, they once they realize something's like more work, you're not in the position to be like, I'll pay you, keep working. You know, they're like, oh, this is now becoming a little too much, and if this person's not willing to settle by now, like that's all these lawyers honestly care about is settlements. So, you know, when they weren't seeing that happen the first couple months, and then they found that in the stipulated judgment, you know, that's when they were like, we don't know if we can fight this much longer.
And so you got nothing from that. You got no compensation or anything.
No. But
oh gosh.
Yeah, it was horrible. It was, and I can, you know, now the adult window opened up, and so it's like all these different windows are now like I could go back there, but it was like it was so devastating. Like it was so upsetting to realize that was like that the system was even designed that people could do that. That I was like, I'm now just gonna rage like in a very different way. Like I was like, I don't even care about the court. Like I want people to know what is possible, what people are doing in this industry, and how devastating it actually is. And because no one was really advocating for me, I was like, well, I'm gonna start advocating for other survivors, because that's what I wasn't seeing. And so I wanted to do that. And that's what I ended up doing.
And that
was the birth of that.
Wow. So since 2019, basically.
It was 2021. Oh. So I got divorced in 2019. So it took me it was 2016 I escaped him. 2019 divorce was finalized. Then 2021 I sue him. And then 2022, I start Eat Predators. So,
oh, wow, this is like really new.
Very new.
You were talking live on Nickelodeon, or about Nickelodeon in 2019.
Correct.
So it's kind of crossing paths. So maybe some people know you from the Nickelodeon. Some people know you from the music protests.
Yes.
I mean, it's just a lot happening to you. So they're just like, I know. And then like last year, I think it was the Jonah Hill thing. It's just like your life. I mean, it's just like trauma after trauma after trauma, which is like a case for like so many child stars.
Yes.
A lot of them like don't even get to live past certain ages because they just like Dana Plato, like all those people just, you never hear their stories. But
yes. And because these networks don't even like pay any of us, like Nickelodeon we don't make any money off of Nickelodeon, not even 1 cent. Like
no residuals.
No, they just make billions of dollars and don't pay us any residuals.
Okay, this is, and people I saw like you got backlash for having the merch out, and it's like, you're just trying to make money somehow off something that robbed you.
Yeah, well, and like, also it's a protest sign. Like I've been making those T-shirts of the protest signs for the last like year.
And when they're like, "Oh, it doesn't go to any survivors," I'm like, "You're the survivor." Like it goes
as
to
if
you.
I'm somebody outside of the dock.
I'm
in the dock.
No, that's what's so bizarre to me. I'm like, okay, but this is all you're talking about, and all those child stars, they all get like screwed over and stuff for this same reason of just
yes.
And so, what are they supposed to do? Like, you have to like make money somehow.
You have to make that's why I started. Well, when I started the show, because I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to protest much longer without a job. And so I was like, how am I going to keep protesting, advocating if I have no job. Like, I mean, if I have no money, no income. So I was like, okay, well, I'll make a Patreon. I was like, a Patreon's a great way because then it's all community built. And that's exciting to me personally is when everyone can like get together and be like, let's go do this.
Yeah.
Like, let's actually, especially protesting, it is so exhausting. It's like just organizing it alone is insane.
Yeah. I can't even imagine.
Organizing it, and then I make all those protest signs with my husband. It's like a full-time, with 2 kids, like we're up till 4 a.m, like making 30 protest signs.
It's just you two.
It's just us two.
And so Patreon, is it patreon.com/eatpredators?
It is, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so people can go there to support. Well, because people, I think, especially after Quiet on Set, they're like, because you feel so helpless and you're like, gosh, these people like don't, and they all say the same thing. They kind of were like hung out to dry by Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
And so it's now as adults, it's like, okay, you have trauma, you have all this stuff, and it's like, what can you do about it to not only get it out there? Like you said, you can't do all this work without the money behind it. You can't just
do anything. I mean, honestly, it's hard to just go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Like
oh
we
my
all
gosh.
it's like
yeah.
it is, and so you're like, okay, how is this actually going to be sustainable where I can fully dedicate my time to this? I've dedicated like literally my life to it.
I forget how young you are because you are doing so much. You've done so much. And Zoey 101, I was too old to watch. I was like, wait, no, you're like really young, but you do so much. And you speak so well about everything.
Thank you.
Wow. But now with Quiet on Set coming out and being so mainstream, do you find more people coming to you? Because it really is, this is my first time hearing about your stories. Are more people now coming to you wanting to work with you and wanting to be a part of it? Like the movement?
Yes, the movement. Now people are like, I feel like now people are watching the show and listening to what I have to say, which has been like very rewarding because sometimes I'm like, is anybody listening what I'm trying to say?
Right.
But now people are listening to me and supporting, and there are new Patreon members, and now there's more viewers on the show, which has been, but I would say, obviously mainstream Hollywood like still wants nothing to do.
You think so? But this is pretty mainstream. I mean, Quiet on Set's the biggest thing right now.
I haven't heard from anybody within Hollywood.
Okay.
But I have heard, obviously, like, there's people I've been connecting with,
Right.
like you. But when it comes to mainstream, like, no. They kind of stay, I think other people maybe, but outside of Quiet on Set, like, I go in with a megaphone outside their offices and they get really annoyed by me.
They're like, this is intense.
Yeah, they're like, wait a minute. Okay, everyone but maybe her. We support her maybe over here. But like I'm a little bit I'm a whistleblower,
And very polarizing. People online definitely love and hate what you're doing, which is like so bizarre because everyone is always with the victim, right?
Yes.
And then with you, it's like it does have that sort of push and pull where some people are really upset with you.
Well,
but it's like, why?
Like recently what happened with that t-shirt thing, for example, I like looked, I'm like, these are all retweet accounts. These are bot bounties. So people can I did a whole episode about this. So basically there's these, not WhatsApp, but whatever that other app is where you can like have group chats. I forget what it's called with a T. Telegram, thank you. Yeah, Okay, Telegram. Yeah, there's these NFT bounties that you can do, and you basically give people cryptos to go and attack an account.
Oh.
And so you can usually tell when someone's doing that by just going and looking at what accounts are saying it.
Okay.
And they'll usually be retweet accounts where they only have like 15 followers and they're just retweeting things. Like they're paid crypto to boost like NFT things. And so I did this whole uncovering of that like months ago because John Vaccaro, who's Dan Schneider's best friend, does shit like that to me, in my opinion. Like I've followed the trail to John Vaccaro, and ever since I protested Nickelodeon, that is when I started to see these retweet accounts coming out of nowhere. And Dan Schneider's best friend, follows the person who I have a restraining order against. And he's no one knows who he is. Never told the world who he was. And Dan Schneider's best friend follows this random person who I have a restraining order against.
Oh, so he's doing this hate attack on you. Because I thought it was interesting. I was like, God, there's
Weird,
a
right?
lot. Yeah, I was like, everyone is always with the victims, especially no matter what.
Yes.
And you're not doing anything that's not truthful. So it's like, this is an odd attack.
Yeah,
on
you
just
look at them. Yeah, and just me.
No one else. Like, there's so much happening on Quiet on Set. And I'm like, why is no one else? Yeah. It's
I
so
looked at it and I was
interesting.
like, what is this?
Oh.
And then you're like, at first, you're like, what the hell is this? And then you look at them and you're like, like I just knew, like, you know, yesterday I was like, oh, okay, I know what this is. And that's what also you have to go through when you're doing these things.
Yeah.
People that have like random money to throw down can literally hire accounts to just trash you.
Damn you, yeah.
And then, you know, for example, people are actually in my DMs, my email box, so kind, and loving and supporting.
So supportive.
And all of the people who were part of Quiet on Set are getting the T-shirt, and they knew about the T-shirt before it launched.
Yeah.
And then these random people are going to tell. It's so
Try
weird.
and make it seem like something's weird. Because I was like, usually I like can like see why people get hate. I'm like, this is very odd that you'd be getting
Very
it,
weird.
especially after being like a leader in this and getting Quiet on Set made. Because I'm sure like you and Jeanette McCurdy talking about this is why they made it, right? Like you guys have talked about it for so long. Because why else would they all of a sudden come out with this?
Yeah, and Kate Taylor, who like helps source a lot of the interviews, is a main reason. I mean, for example, like I was the first person to sign on to the doc, and I also was the first person they like asked me to basically record why this documentary was important when they were pitching it around.
Oh, so you're the only one attached while they're pitching it.
I think there was one, Kate Taylor, who did all the sourcing. So she was the one who did the Business Insider expose on Dan Schneider. That
she's
happened
on it.
a year. Yeah, she's in it. She's the blonde.
I was like, is she a child star? But she's just like one of the reporters talking because she was young.
And she's awesome. I mean, she did such an incredible job. She got those two female writers to come forward. And that was all her sourcing and reporting. And so she was attached to it.
But Drake wasn't.
No, Drake wasn't. I didn't even know Drake was in it.
Oh, when did you find out? Like when it was coming out?
A little bit before, yeah. Before everyone else, a little bit.
Did you know his story?
No.
Wow, crazy. So, okay, wait, but are you, okay, you guys you guys know each other?
He was on Zoey 101 for one episode, and I had to like go and like jump onto him and give him a kiss or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
It's
How
already.
old was he on the show?
And he was definitely over 18. I'm pretty sure he was 18, but it wasn't lips. It was on his cheek, and he was supposed to be disgusted, but it was still one of those situations where Dan's making me
jump on a man.
Yes. And I'm like, yeah. And you're like, wow.
Oh my God. And at 14, I mean, it's so different. Like you said, you probably became the character a little bit, but it's like, that's so uncomfortable anyways to be close to a boy and crazy, especially Drake. But I remember that episode with the t-shirts, right? You guys had the merch. And
exactly.
I was like a little old to be watching it, but I remember I was like, ooh, this is like kind of, it's cute.
Wait, I
it's
love
like,
that you know that episode.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I remember. I was like, and then it's like, oh yeah, that one was kind of cute actually. But yeah, that's okay. So you knew him.
I knew him, but barely.
You never talk because it's interesting because I know it seems like the boys don't have any issue with Dan Schneider. He said it on Quiet on Set where he's like, Dan Schneider and I didn't have any issues. So it's kind of interesting when people.
Oh, but he believes he does believe that Dan Schneider should be, apologizing to us.
And he never has.
He has still not apologized to us.
Britney Spears apologizes to you, but not Dan Schneider.
In my DMs.
Wow.
She messaged me privately before she did anything publicly.
Wow. So she was like thinking about it.
Yeah. I literally said, Britney Spears, I got an alert. And it was right
on
when
Instagram?
Yes.
Wow.
And I thought it was like a fan account. You know when you like see Britney, I was like, okay, it's a fan account. And I was like, no, this is actually Britney Spears.
What year is this?
This was 2022.
Oh my gosh. So she's going through her own shit and she's like, let me apologize to her.
Yeah. And it was paragraphs of just so kind to me and supporting everything that I've been doing.
Wow.
And told me that my baby was beautiful and gave me like this was an actual apology. And I love her.
Like I love her and I love her even more now. The fact that she's just like DM'd you to apologize.
DM'd me.
Wow.
And then she put a whole letter about me publicly.
Yeah.
And then she put me in the book.
I mean,
it's like, who does that? That's like actual, like, you're just real.
Wow.
Like, nice person.
I love that.
Love. That's the only apology I've ever gotten.
You think Dan would like apologize to try and like at least smooth things over or at least get you, because once you apologize to someone, I feel like, okay, then maybe you don't have to talk as much, right? Because you're like, okay, I guess he apologized, whatever.
Correct.
You know what I mean? But he hasn't. And that's what's the most frustrating thing is when you don't take any accountability.
None. But he says in the video, he's like, I owe a lot of people an apology. And you're like, well, then call them.
Yeah.
Like,
DMs are open.
Why are you with Boogie right now? And what is going on here?
The interview was wild. That interview was crazy. I was like, why would he do this right now?
This is so weird.
So weird. And not apologize to the people that are so vocal about it. Like,
and he acts like he didn't even do anything. You're like, he like beats around the whole thing, like maybe it was a little bit of a shitty boss and like I had some bad days and not a good batting average. And you're like, what are you talking about, dude? Did you not see Ariana Grande? Like, do you not?
Yeah.
You are so annoying.
I wonder if it's like admitting guilt by saying, like, if he had to apologize to you, does that open up a lawsuit? I don't know. You know what I mean?
That's all. It's probably his lawyers are telling him that.
To not apologize.
Everyone's just kind of told to protect their assets. I always say that. You know what I mean?
Totally, yeah.
And you're like, okay. And that's why I think accountability is really hard to happen in these high profile situations, because they think about what they own, you know, and what can be taken versus doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And then they got these people around them making money off of them, really wanting them not to lose their assets.
Right. Right. They're like, don't say anything.
Yes, because we want your money and keep that money there. And so it's really hard for accountability, especially in Hollywood or in high profile situations, to happen because, sadly, capitalism, you know, like these things like kind of block accountability, because you're told that the only way that people can get justice most of the time is through monetary exchange. And because that's how our system is built, it's very hard for change to happen, because most likely the person doesn't want to have to hand over what they've built or whatever. And so it's just a very complicated, accountability is so hard in these situations. And so I don't think Dan Schneider got a heart-to-heart advice. I'm sure he got a lawyer to team to Dan, mind to mind. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Maybe he shouldn't have said anything at all, you know?
I agree. Just...
It's kind of like the Brian Peck, because where is he at? He's just like hiding. I mean, what can we say?
Brian Peck is like, God, I hope he can't be around children. Like, what's scary is that he was working so often after he was arrested around children.
No,
look at all the letters.
Yes. I know.
Could you believe that?
No, that's wild to me. The letters are crazy when people write stuff like that. I'm like,
what are you thinking?
Yeah. Or the fact that like a 14-year-old can tempt like a grown man, like
unbelievable.
But the fact that people think this stuff, like also just like normal people think this stuff, I'm like, that's wild.
So like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And also I love Danny's like, you know, I did not write a letter to
Wow.
you know, for Brian. You're like, neither did Brian Singer. Who cares? Brian Singer's a creep. And he didn't write a letter either, because probably his lawyers told him not to, which probably your lawyers told you not to as well. But he's trying to use that as like, at least I didn't write a letter. It's like, bro.
Yeah.
That's the least of your worries, honestly, right now.
Right.
Like, we see your footage. Like,
because like with Dan, it's like, could anyone, I'm trying to think like, did you do anything criminal?
There's a little bit of criminal activity, just because when you are ever putting children in suggestive... it depends where it ends up getting. Like, let's say, for example, I think the only way that it would be able to become a criminal offense would be, let's say, if this stuff ends up on the black market, like on other places where children are being exploited because of the content that's being created.
And you said that's happened. You've seen it.
I haven't. So basically, when in 2019, I didn't know about the Ariana Grande material until 2019. I got sent out of nowhere. Everyone's like, did you see this? Did you see this? And I'm like, what is this? And I clicked on it, and it took me to YouTube, and I wasn't signed in, and it said, are you 18 or over? And I went, oh, wait, how is an Ariana Grande Nickelodeon thing 18 or over? And so I signed in. And then I would get messages that people were saying that they were on CP websites.
Okay, so people were telling you didn't actually see it.
I would not click on that.
Yeah, of course.
I was like, oh, no.
That is so hard. How do you report stuff without...
Right.
Did you try to report it? Be like,
I didn't even know what to do. I was like, I was processing. I was like, who to contact? I'm like in my studio apartment in Los Angeles. You know, I'm like, what is this? And so I think he did do things that are on the verge, but I would say that it would probably end up being more of a civil situation than it will be a criminal, because honestly, even look at Brian Peck. I mean, even in the criminal situation, no one does anything.
But those accounts were wild. When they showed all the charges that he was guilty of, I'm like, these are crazy. These are like
heartbreaking.
Yeah. I mean, that's wild. That's why I was thinking with Dan, I'm like, what? I mean, really, what could, I guess you can't really get him other than he's somewhat canceled. He doesn't work with Nickelodeon anymore. But he said he's trying to come back. Because there was supposed to be a Zoey 101 reboot.
And it happened. They did a Zoey 101 film.
As adults.
It was called Zoey 102.
Oh, okay.
It was called Zoey 102. Oh. And it's like a wedding. It's like a whole whatever. And it was on Paramount Plus.
Oh, I didn't know.
And Dan was not a part of that, from my knowledge, because this was already after the expose happened. So Dan just kind of, once that Business Insider article came out, it was over.
Okay.
So
that
much.
did do something.
It did do something because, and he wouldn't respond, and it was this whole thing, and then yes, so he hasn't really been able to have a comeback, but I did hear recently that he was having producer rights on like the Henry Danger film.
And I was like just thinking, like, do they make shows? They don't make shows with kids anymore, right?
Who, Nickelodeon?
Yeah.
They do.
Like the sitcoms of it. Like
I think like JoJo Siwa. Well, I don't know what they're doing now these days, but yeah, JoJo Siwa.
There's that whole thing. When you were talking about the gifts, there was a Rolling Stone article about her giving gifts to parents that felt abused, the kids that felt abused. They'd go home crying afterwards, and they said they're in their room would be like a gaming station and be like, feel better, like come back to set, like whatever. Yeah. So when he said that, I was like, oh, it's very, it was a whole thing. Just a couple months ago, the Rolling Stone did an article on it.
Really?
Two girls came forward at the XOMG Pop. So yeah, I don't know if it would make sense if they're working with her.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Yeah. Isn't JoJo Siwa also a person who was close with Colleen Ballinger? Mm-hmm. You're like,
yeah, there's a whole thing there.
What's that?
Still defending.
No way.
Yeah. She still defends the friendship. At 13 years old. It's crazy.
Can you imagine if Dan Schneider did his own ukulele?
I mean,
kind of could, right?
Kind of could,
I can kind of see
it. Probably should. He probably
should. I mean, Colleen Ballinger also worked on a Dan Schneider show. She did one episode, Victorious.
Oh, really?
Isn't that weird?
Oh.
You gotta pull that up.
Oof.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's so like this connection.
That's what I'm saying. Like the whole connection when we said JoJo Siwa, I was like, ooh, that's like. And I feel for her too because she was probably a victim, Child star, and getting abused on TV where we could see it. So it's like, yeah, you kind of feel bad, but yeah, the cycle can either be repeated, which we've seen obviously other Nickelodeon stars.
We've seen cycle. Yeah, I mean, like, and it's so because it's childhood trauma too. You're like, my lord, like,
are you like stunted? Like, did you ever feel stunted at that age, like the age of your trauma?
I think there maybe there was a little bit of that, but I had really my mom was. Like just even when she had to go to Florida and, obviously I made this decision to stay back, my mom was just always been so like loving. Mm-hmm. And I've always had my mom. And so when I look back at my childhood, I think if I didn't have my mom, I wouldn't be here today. After I look back at like my whole life and I look about everything that's happened to me, the first person that comes to my mind is my mom. That she was really the rock for me. And I always knew I had someone to go to. And she was just always there. Like, no, I can call her about anything. And she's my best friend. And that existed throughout my whole life. And something about that, I think, I don't know. It did have effect on my life. Because I don't know, I would have probably crumbled a long time ago if it wasn't for my mom.
Her being there.
Yeah, it's weird what love can do.
Oh, it's so powerful. It's the right love, obviously with your husband, that. It's like, yes. Yeah. So did you ever go to therapy for any of this stuff?
Well, therapy I did go to some therapy. Actually, how I got out of my abusive marriage was because every time I try to leave him, he would say, "You're crazy. Oh, your self-worth, like you don't love yourself, like you don't want to accept love from me." And he would send these in emails. Oh. And so he goes, and I go, "Fine, I'm going to go get a therapist." And so I got a therapist, and this therapist ended up being the person that was like, "You got to get out of there."
Oh, wonderful.
So him calling me crazy
led you.
And she was like, and that's how I ended up actually escaping. Now, I was only able to pay for it through him because I had no money.
Right.
And he would only give me, he was making like $1 million. I found out way later. He also didn't even show any of his preliminary documents during that process either, but he was making like $1 million and I was only getting like, $1,200 a month,
wow.
To
live.
Yeah. And I wasn't able to get any therapy whatsoever. And still like therapy that's why it's really sad when it comes to Nickelodeon just making this statement out there like, whoops, like, sorry, like now when we make a formal complaint, like we'll make sure to take care of it, maybe kind of, sort of, whatever.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? The best thing they could have done was actually support us through therapy. Yeah. Like I think every person that worked for Nickelodeon that has come forward and said, I have experienced deep trauma from this.
Yeah.
And because you don't pay us residuals, I can't get the help that I deserve to guide me through this trauma. Nickelodeon, I think, should be paying for their therapy.
For sure.
Especially when we hear Drake Bell's story. You're like, at the very least,
yes.
they're him. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Him.
Yeah.
Like, go over there and
post care.
Yes.
Because then it just, as a cycle, you know, all this stuff of being, you know, friends with minors, it's like maybe he's stunted. That's the only thing I could think of. I'm like, okay, maybe he wants to be friends with people that are young because he feels like he's still at 15 or 14 when he got abused. I don't know. I know it's like, I try to understand it because, you know, being a victim of it, you're just like, okay, maybe there's some stunted growth where he still feels like a young mind or something. I don't know.
This is what also makes me a little bit annoyed. Because Nickelodeon hasn't paid us, that now a lot of people are forced into like curating their careers around the nostalgia. And I think that's dangerous because you're supposed to be able to move on after you've done like a project, especially when it has to do with children.
Right.
Because the whole point is like, the only people you should be even having book signings with are the people that watched you when you were younger. But Nickelodeon airs this shit all day, getting new children to be fans of people that are now 40 years old. And you're like, what are we doing here? It's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's fine to have like young fans. I think it's just like, don't become friends with fans.
Don't Zoom them.
That's what it is. And social media makes it seem like you're so close. And so now this girl, you know, they make it seem like they're close. And it's just like, okay, so you just
like, don't go anywhere near minors when you're older.
Okay,
like, you know what I mean?
So we agree on that. I was just like,
what? Like, don't do that because it's too, even if you're doing it in this fan professional setting, it's just why.
I agree. Yeah. It's just like, or just befriending any fans.
I just want my children, like, it's my children I want to be around.
Right.
I'm not really, you know what I mean? I get messages from fans all the time that you see their little like, you know, thing and you're like, oh, they're young. I don't even open those.
Yeah. It's
because who am I going to talk to?
Yeah. And also you don't know if their parents want you to communicate with them. Like if you should be giving them advice and that could be looked at as something.
I have only spoken to fans, that were obviously my age and just said, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
And that's the last message
you don't want to be held
when people
accountable.
are talking to your fan, that's weird to me.
I think that too. I always think that. I think that's a power dynamic that shouldn't be there no matter what age, you know? It's
why are you... I got that with Justin Long. So Justin Long... He was you should watch my video about Justin Long.
I didn't. I had never seen this one. I saw like all yours about everyone. All of it was new to me. The Jonah Hill stuff, everything was new, and I was just like, where was I? Because I feel like I'm so connected to this stuff, but
there's so much going on all the time, honestly, with the internet too. But Justin Long, he literally was talking to like a 15-year-old girl and like sending him, you know, like getting haircuts at the barber, and at one point, she says like to be her daddy. And he's like, will your dad let me? Like something like that.
And it's actually him?
And it's actually verified and it's him.
Oh my God.
And you're like, why are, she's calling him Herbie Fully Loaded, character from the Disney movie that he was when he was younger. And he's responding and you're like, what the hell?
I don't know. It's so dark. James Franco. I mean,
James Franco. What is that?
I used to write letters like when I was 13 to like 45, 50-year-old celebrities and they would like fly me out to LA and stuff like that. Like so many.
Wait,
it was
what?
crazy. Yeah, it happened all the time. I was like so starstruck by anyone. If they were like a D-list, anyone. All the way up till I was like 18. Yeah, 16. I was going to like visit people on set that were like 50 years old. Like crazy.
What?
Yeah. But it's such a scary thing. I put out some people that I've talked to, but it's such a scary thing to put out too. Also just
that
people
is scary.
Don't believe a lot of times. So I don't know if you ever experienced that, but just like, you know, thinks it's unbelievable or they say, you know, or they blame. I think that's what was so triggering is with those letters about Brian Packett saying like the 14-year-old tempted me, which is what exactly happened when I was younger. It's like, well, she wrote to me and then you start feeling, and then your parents are like, well, why did you do that? Why did you do it behind her back? So it becomes like when you share your story, it's really brave because I don't think I ever would until other people started. I always like, wait, I was like, someday someone's going to talk about this person and then maybe I can join in. But it was a different time. We don't have a digital footprint. I was like writing letters and stuff, but you know.
It is very scary because I would say for the most part, no one believes survivors. And that is why when I started protesting and once I got my megaphone for the first time, which was like, I don't know, my fourth protest, I finally got a megaphone. And I was like, what am I going to say in here? Like, what am I going to say through here? You know, it's this big like, Warner music group, you know? And I was like, what am I going to say? And for so long, the slogan for, you know, empowering survivors was believe survivors. You know, you would see the t-shirts like believe survivors, and something about that going through the megaphone, like felt like I was reliant on someone else to like validate my experience. And I remember like going, power to survivors. and what that felt like to say versus believe survivors, like changed my whole life.
Right.
Because it's not about, I think we're so past, we've learned so much after the Me Too movement in regards to how people respond to survivorhood. And what I've really taken away from that is that the most important thing when it comes to survivor advocacy or just supporting a survivor is empowering them and making them feel like they do have the power to go seek justice. And that's it. It's not even anymore about relying on somebody to believe them. It's about us as a society making sure that everything is set up for them to be able to get the justice they deserve, and nothing should be blocking that. And if anything is blocking that, then that means us as a society has to remove those blocks. And usually that means listening to what the survivor is saying. Like, these are the things that are complicated, like me talking about red light, for example. Like, that law needs to change. There shouldn't be assault and battery and all this stuff in a stipulated divorce agreement, And so I think the more we listen to survivors, it's not necessarily about us believing them. It's about us empowering them. And I think the minute that we step outside of going, I needed to be there to know, it's like, does that really matter?
No.
I think what matters is empowering them.
Yeah.
And going, I want a person to go get the justice they deserve in life. And if I'm blocking that, then I'm a problem, to be honest. Like, what is it to you to make things easier for someone just to go seek justice? Like, that's why that really dawned on me, 2 years ago. And it's now I never even really say it. Like, I always say power to survivors. I never say believe survivors because it gives too much power to the other people.
Right.
And it's time for survivors to go, we got the power. We know what happened to us. Now let us go get justice and support us. And we deserve it. And you know what I mean? Like, it's changes.
Way more, yeah.
Yeah, you feel like, let's go.
Yeah. You can go
Let's
petition.
go.
Have you ever gone to like Congress or anything like that to try and petition?
I might end up doing that.
Yeah.
That's my next goal. I think I've actually been talking to a lot of the people from Quiet on Set and trying to figure out a way to take this, like, create some type of legislation.
Yeah, how does that even start? You like just go protest there?
It is. Like, anytime I can protest, I'm
write a
going to
bill,
protest. Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure protesting is involved if they don't do something, if they don't accept the bill.
Okay.
But legislation is actually pretty simple in the sense where you do need a lawyer to write it out, and then you do need just like a legislator to help get it in front of the right people. So there's a couple steps to it. It's just really finding a lawyer that is willing to take the time to write out a proper, bill, basically. And because you can't write it yourself.
Right.
You really need to make sure a lawyer's overseeing that. But it's more complicated to get people to vote yes on it.
Yeah.
Because usually survivor, like, for example, even the California adult essay bill that recently got opened up was a cover-up bill. And the reason why they ended up making this a cover-up act was because they realized that it was going to be a lot harder for them to get people to sign on to opening up the adult statute if it was just to open up the adult statute. Because people are like, well, there's like, politics, like, well, how can we believe somebody if it was like 20 years ago? And then these people are going to lose their assets and that whole thing happens. But what everyone definitely agrees on is no one likes cover up of any kind. So you can always get the right and the left to agree when cover up is present, because anyone who's like, no, cover up's chill, that's like, who are you?
Yeah.
So they made it the Cover-Up Act. Oh. And that was also able to get these institutions to be, exposed, honestly, for how they were covering up SA by these NDAs that are literally built into their business model. But I think it's all about the language. So I think it's going to probably take at least a year for me to kind of get to that point, but it's definitely a goal of mine because sadly, these things are really baked into the cake. And it's going to take us collectively to pass things through to really create like systemic change.
Yeah.
Because I can sit outside all the time protesting and basically I make the noise and I'm like, go look there, like investigate, basically. Like you go in there, it's bad in there. You know what I mean? I'm making the noise, but eventually what's going to have to happen is how do we make sure that they cannot get away with it anymore?
Yeah, to stop it from the future.
Totally.
What's your first bill you'd want? Because there's like 2 big things you have, right? 3, 4. There's so many. Where do you start? What's your main goal?
I would probably say that the main goal right now, after really processing also quiet on set, like, because I thought I was the only person. Even when I sat down, I didn't know how many people were going to sit down after me.
You were surprised
I was surprised.
Okay.
Every person, when people would talk about Dan, I'm like, I was shocked.
Many.
He was there. I was shocked.
It was like heavily about Dan Schneider,
It was heavily about Dan Schneider, and I was shocked. And so after watching that, I think there really does need to be some things put into place. I would say the most important is that there needs to be a therapist on set at all times.
They have those for reality shows. They should have them for children's shows.
They have them for reality shows?
Why did Celebrity Big Brother? And they had me talk to a therapist like every 20 minutes. They're like, we have one on set. And he'd like come in, and you're not supposed to have people in the house, and he'd like come in and talk to me. Yeah.
What? So, well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So then it's like, this should not be a problem.
Yeah, that's,
like,
I think the first, that should be so easy to get.
That is so good to know. I feel like that has to be like a union, like, and legislative, like this, you have to have a therapist on set, because also a therapist has to report if something is abusive. So they can't be bought out by the whatever, Nickelodeon or whatever it is, because they have a duty to fulfill.
For sure, yeah.
And so I think a therapist on set for child actors is going to be the first step, because it's not like child actors are going to stop anytime soon, sadly.
Mm-hmm. Therapy for everybody on there, for sure.
I think therapy, and also I think there should be no emancipation or proficiency tests, because for me, my agent was pressuring me into taking a proficiency test so that it looked like I was graduated from high school so I could work adult hours. And that's a loophole that so many networks and producers were all allowing.
Amanda Bynes did that, right?
She did the emancipation.
Yeah.
And so I think there has to be like no loopholes. Like there should be no emancipation, proficiency tests, child labor laws are always set in stone, no matter what the hell is happening. You know, I don't care if like they got adopted, but I don't care. Child labor laws should always stay put, and there shouldn't be loopholes, around that. So there's a couple things that I've been thinking about. One of the other things that I would really want to pass would definitely be just opening up the statutes for adult and specifically child, CSA survivors, because the average, the average length of time it takes for a survivor to come forward is 50 years.
Oh, yeah, I believe that.
It's so long. And, if the statistics are there, the facts are there, why aren't our laws there? Where's the laws when it comes to understanding that fact? And so I would love just to open up the statutes. I think it's really important that we don't have it close at any point, so that survivors just always feel that if and when they want to, they can, at least on the civil level.
Yeah.
Criminal is another thing, but I think on the civil, there are things that the statutes don't close, when it comes to murder,
Right.
Like, why should a crime like why is that not something that's opened?
Right. That is,
it is lifelong trauma. Like that
Yeah.
person's never the same. I'm not the same after what happened to me.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I've gone through.
You're surviving.
Yeah. It really is. Yeah.
It's
Survival
surviving.
mode, yeah.
Yeah, and you're having to always, and when the memory comes in, I don't know, I have days where I'm like shower, you're just constantly, it's a lot. And so I think that statute needs to be opened, because 3 to 5 years ain't cutting it.
Yeah, that's wild. You don't even realize what's happened to you, or if it was abuse. You just don't know.
Not at all.
You think it's normal. I thought everything was normal. I was like, well, this is normal. Like,
I thought so many things were normal.
You're like, I guess this is what happens. And
that's exactly. And then the Me Too movement happened, and I was like, grooming. What is that word? What is this? Oh, that's that.
Yeah.
Oh, power dynamics. I had no idea.
No, I don't think anything that came up until recently. Now people are talking about it, but
and thank God they are. And so since we're learning now, we got to have the statutes open, because so many people didn't even realize
for sure
that certain things were wrong, and they're going to therapy. Their lives are altered for forever, and they don't even have any. They can't get justice.
Right.
The worst is when justice is blocked, and I think that's my main, if I were to start really getting active in that space, is where's the blocks? Like, justice cannot be blocked.
Right.
And wherever justice is blocked, we got to remove the blockade, because it's so, I learned that from the stipulated judgment. And there's nothing worse than something getting in the way of your justice. It is I think, as heartbreaking or as re-traumatizing as
yeah.
what you experienced. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it takes you back to that victim place where you feel helpless and you feel like frozen, honestly. And so I think that would be kind of, but there's so much to do, obviously.
You really do need so much help and support. It's like
Yes.
a lot for one person, especially just also your mental health and all that stuff like that.
And 2 kids.
And 2 kids. And you're doing this and talking about it constantly. Like hearing it just now, like we weren't watching the documentary for so long. So I'm like, I can't. I would see clips on TikTok. I'm like, I don't want to. Like it's so heavy. We watched it. It's so heavy. And I'm just like, it's just like darkness. And like you have to like, and it's important you talk about your story, but it's like you're living in this darkness over and over again. And it's like such a toll on your mental health, but like no one else is going to do it. And it's important you do. Just finding those people to support it.
Well, thank you. I mean, this is even just so nice to be able to sit down here and have people listening, because I think the first step in any type of change is just people like listening.
Yeah. And making it, and hopefully it gets more mainstream. I think it will. I think quiet onset's a huge thing. I know I was like, you just feel helpless at the end of the day. It's like, what can you do? But it sounds like you are doing a lot.
Thank you.
And the Patreons, people supporting you, it's like a huge thing. And
Thank you.
Those are the people who's going to change it. Cause I think, like you said, there's so much darkness in there, and I think those will change it, and you'll change
Thank
it.
you.
There's just, I didn't know how to even prepare for this or what to say, cause it's just a lot, you know? But I definitely have my support.
You're
I
so
think
sweet.
you have a lot of people's support.
Thank you.
It took a while, you know, but thankfully for this documentary and all this stuff coming out, it'll continue. And I hope you feel a little justice, at least having this come out, the validation, and above all else, Britney Spears validating you.
Right.
I think that's really
Like,
it. That's
I'm
it.
good. I
If
think
Britney
about
Spears
that time.
apologizes privately, publicly in her book, I think
I'll be okay.
that says a lot. Yeah.
I hope.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here. You guys, check out Alexa everywhere. She has her own podcast, Eat Predators, on Patreon. Check her out. Maybe one day we'll see you at the Capitol with the
you
bill,
imagine?
passing all of it. It has to. This is how change happens, right? The
It
Coogan
is.
account, all that stuff like that. There'll be an Alexa account.
I'll definitely
Alexa
be
bill.
reaching out.
Yeah, we're excited.
Come
We're
on the
excited to watch
streets
it.
with me.
Yeah. Well, thank you
out.
again. I really
you.
and Quiet on Set is coming out with another.
Yes, yeah.
Are you in
episode.
that?
No, I'm not. No,
Okay.
it's Drake.
It's just kind of like a recap.
Yes, it's
Okay.
a recap. I think it's on April 6th. Thank you.
It's a lot. Go check out our podcast because you talk about all this stuff endlessly. Ned's declassified stuff we haven't even gotten to. Just so much stuff. So go check out her podcast.
Yeah.
It's,
Thank you so
it's,
much.
It's wild. You really get in. I trust you with your research, so thanks for clarifying.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
guys. We'll see
everyone.
you next time.